Well, the 1201 project is finished. At long last, we finally finished and published the 1201 project. This is an in-depth study of the habits of 1,201 leaders. Took us a little over 7 years to complete the work, which includes the research and the writing and the testing. Well, here it is. There's a link here in the notes just down below, or you can search for the 1201 Project on Amazon. If you want a quick view of it or you want to get it somewhere else, you can search for the 1201 Project book on Google, and you'll be able to find it there as well. This all started in a restroom of a famous steakhouse in Chicago. You know, if I ever heard someone saying something about a book starting in a restroom in a steakhouse in Chicago, I'd probably lean in and listen. I think it was a little bit of a sketchy story. But here's the story. I excused myself from the elegant table that we had set at a 5-star steakhouse in Chicago to use the restroom. A few minutes later, John, who's a friend of mine and one of my dinner companions, joined me at the marble sinks that are sitting there. We were the only two in the restroom. After washing my hands, I reflexively wiped the water around the sink and tossed the towel in the basket. And as I turned toward John and saw that he was doing exactly the same thing, and I said, "Do you always do that?" Pointing at the towel in his hand. And he said, "Well, yeah, I guess so," and looked at his towel with a shrug and a smile. And I said, "You know, that's kind of weird, don't you?" He said, "Yeah, I guess I know. Come to think about it," he said, "I have a lot of habits that other people would think are weird." We both chuckled about it together. And then as we walked back to the dinner table, we began a conversation about those weird habits. That conversation spread among the other 8 or 10 members of the dinner party that night, all of whom were pivotal leaders in their own industry and vocations. By the time the Highland Scotch and the Lowland cigars were finished that evening, we had compiled a long, humorous list of quirky habits and then the motivations behind those habits that were common among nearly all of us around the table. The what of the habits was as interesting to me as the why behind each of these habits. So I started asking a lot of questions. Why does Ron, the CEO of a global company, wash coffee cups in the executive staff kitchen area at the end of the day? Why does Len always pay for the order 2 cars behind him whenever he's using the drive-thru at Starbucks? Why does Sherry tip the housekeeper $40 at the end of the last night of her stay, even if it's only a 1-night stay or a 2-night stay, something short in a hotel? Why does Christopher pick up litter on the floor in public places rather than just step over it? What were John and I thinking when we wiped up the water after ourselves in the restroom at a 5-star steakhouse in Chicago? At more than one point in the past several years, I and some of my friends at the dinner table that night have been the subject of snickers and rolled eyes and curious questions and awed looks. When one of the habits becomes visible to others, I've learned to kind of brace myself for their astonishment and behind-the-hand comments, maybe a touch of ridicule. I've even been asked, "You do what?" with narrowed eyes and furrowed brows. The question is usually followed by a dismissive, "Oh, I could never do that. That's not how I could live." For a time, those reactions had a little bit of a disorienting effect on me, and they left me feeling kind of, isolated, a little bit alone, a little odd. Therefore, when I discovered the quirky habits of the 8 or 10 of my respected colleagues at the dinner table that night, my curiosity piqued. Are the habits that I and they have all that odd? They work well for us. They keep us from believing our own press, whether it's good or bad. They shorten our tempers. They lengthen our attention spans. They deepen our judgment, and they enrich our respect for the people that we serve. They work. Could versions of our habits, I wondered, and our mental models and our assumptions work for others as well? Do other people have these kind of habits and disciplines and mental models? So I wanted to find that out. I wanted to go beyond the anecdotes that we shared over scotch and cigars at the restaurant in Chicago. So I released our research hounds, who joined the hunt and uncovered a goldmine of insight. This is the result of that work. So welcome, therefore, to the backstage, behind-the-scenes look at the habits and disciplines and assumptions of a set of really interesting leaders. Now, these leaders are leaders of teams and departments and business units and, organizations, churches, divisions, all kinds of folks. They all have had really significant impact on our society in some way. Whenever we create habits or enact disciplines over a long period of time, we do so because they work for us. A little effort in the same direction over a long period of time is going to move mountains. Habits work because we have a potent set of assumptions at play behind the habits on kind of a barely conscious level that drive or power those habits. That's what I like to think of as the why behind the act. The why behind the act or the habit, which is intentional at first, will fuel it until the behavior comes naturally to us. It's like it becomes reflexive and habitual. In surprisingly short order, the act itself then becomes the reward. So this is part of the power and the beauty of our habit-craving brain. We dive deeply into that dynamic, by the way, in this book that I'm recommending to you. So over a 4-year period, we interviewed and surveyed 1,201 people in leadership positions across the United States and Canada. The survey group consisted of 2 subgroups. Group A, which was made up of 816 people, half of whom were women and half of whom were men, and then Group B, which was made up of 385 people. 300 of those were men and 85 were women. In the book, I describe why this group was not made up of a 50-50 male-female split in the book, at the very beginning of the book. So then Group A was made up of people who had been in leadership positions for at least 20 years, many longer than that, and who had maintained interesting and increasing levels of effectiveness and consistent objective success during that time. We called that group the Lifelong Achievers Group, or the Achievers Group in short. And until the publishing of this work, that group did not know that that was their group's name. Group B was comprised of people who had been in and then out of leadership positions for at least 20 years, some longer than that, and who had all at some point risen to the lofty heights of success and notoriety in their fields, but then it was followed by a significant and protracted and unreversed failures that were personal, professional, and for many, failures across their organizations. So at the end of the 1201 project, not one of those participants in Group B had returned to a level of success and effectiveness in their personal or professional lives. We call that group, Group B, or the burnout group. That group also did not know that that's the label it had been given. The core question of this project was, are the habits and disciplines and mental models and the values of Group A, the Achievers Group, different from those of Group B, the burnout group? Spoiler alert, they are. The habits and disciplines and mental models and then the values of the two groups are different. They are wildly different. And none of the habits of the Achievers Group are actually out of reach or grueling or bizarre, something you and I cannot actually repeat. So, you're a leader, you're a manager, you're a supervisor, you're somebody who has influence over other people and you're trying to influence them to be better and to do better. This book, I think, will be very helpful for you. Leadership is hard, but we often make it a lot harder than it needs to be because we haven't deliberately developed the habits and the disciplines that our work demands. This book is full of small changes that you can make And if you do, they'll make a big difference right away. So snag a copy. You'll see yourself on many of the pages. I think you might enjoy this book. Here's to you.